Hey guys, welcome back to another Division 2 video. And this week we just got a brand new global event called Rage Harvest. This event gives you a stacking bonus of weapon damage, rate of fire, crit chance, crit damage, and weapon handling, and it occasionally can make you immune to damage. So with all that, I wanted to see how my go-to global event farming build handled it, and well, this thing is an absolute beast, capable of hitting over 6 million to the body and 8 million to the head. And that was with a defensive backpack talent. This build with straight damage, I was hitting a little over 10 million to the head at the very high end. It's pretty nuts. So with that, let's take a look. Alright, so here's the new event. It's called Rage Harvest. And since this is a new event, I'll go over the details and how it works. And right here you can see the description is quite long. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but basically the enemies are going to have this overheal right here. And it's very easy to tell. They'll all have this green shield icon above their head. And when they have this, they have increased life pool and damage, and they can heal really fast. So you can see this heavy gunner right here. I'm hitting him with some pretty solid damage, but because I'm taking damage, he is out healing my damage. So their ability to heal is extremely powerful if you don't kill them quick enough. Then as you damage enemies or just kill them, you're going to build Rage, which is going to be an incremental bonus to your weapon damage, RPM, weapon handling, crit chance, and crit damage. And I'm not sure what the weapon damage bonus is because it's the only one that doesn't show up in the stat sheet. But for everything else, when you're at max stacks, it's 25% RPM, 35% weapon handling, 25% crit chance, 50% crit damage. So when you damage an enemy, you're going to start building up this yellow meter above your armor. Their overheal is actually pretty easy to knock off, so for the most part you're just going to build your rage by killing them. And it takes about 10 kills to get to full rage. Then lastly, there's this Guardian Angel, which basically makes you immune when your armor breaks for a short period, and then it has a long cooldown. So it's a nice little perk, but it's not something you should build around. So when your armor breaks, you're going to have an icon pop up underneath your ammo. It looks like a bird with wings, kind of like the Division 2 logo. And that will make you immune from damage for 10 seconds. And then I'm going to speed this up big time, but you can see after the 10 seconds, it goes from green to gray, and that is the cooldown. And it is quite long, it's 2 minutes, so it's not something you're going to want to build around or really rely on. Then lastly, there is a new reward for this. So if we go into this rewards and scroll to tier 10, it's going to be the Rage Harvest mask. And this is what it looks like. So it's very similar to the way the Hunter masks look, except it goes over the top of your head a little bit more than the Hunter masks do. Alright, so here's the build, and if you've followed my channel, you've probably seen this before. It's basically my go-to build for all of the global events, because it makes it really easy to run all directives, especially the ammo directive every season. But in the case of this new global event, I think it's even more useful than other global events because of the enemy's ability to heal. So having all of your damage right up front is really handy with this global event. So I've tried a handful of builds that rely heavily on stacking, and when you get it stacked, because the event is so powerful, you can pretty much clean up with any build. But those builds that rely heavily on stacking in the beginning, a lot of the ones that I tried were pretty rough trying to get it going. But anyway, here is the build. 4 pieces of ongoing directive. So killing status affected enemies is going to give you hollow point ammo, which is going to amplify your weapon damage by 20%. And then I'm going to be using the chest, so this is going to be amplified by 50%. Then I'm going all red in this build because I am going with a defensive backpack talent. And then you do get that 10-second immunity once every 2 minutes. And then for the crit chance, crit damage, I have 54% crit chance in this build, but you can go as low as 35% if you want. because the event can stack up to 25% crit chance for you when you're at the full buff. I personally don't like going that low and then having to rely on the global event to stack it back up, but you can do whatever you see fit. So then my gloves, weapon damage, crit damage, knee pads, weapon damage, crit chance, and the chest, double crit chance. Then for the backpack, I'm using a piece of Cheska for the crit chance. I have weapon damage crit, and then I'm using the talent Bloodsucker. So this is going to give me 10% bonus armor per kill, stacks up to 10 times. If you wanted to, I put on Unstoppable Force here just to test it out a little bit. That'll stack up to 25% weapon damage. And then on the top end, I was hitting a little over 10 million to the head when I had the full event buff up. Then the mask, I'm using the Tinkerer so that I can use the talent Abridged, which gives me 2 talents on my primary weapon. Then for the weapons, my primary is a UIC 15 Mod 2, and my secondary is an Urban MDR. So normally I use the Urban MDR for my primary, but in this case I'm using the Mod 2 because it just felt a little bit better because of the enemy's ability to heal. Because like in the clip I showed earlier, the enemies can potentially heal really, really fast. And the Mod 2 being slower RPM, harder hitting, just felt like it was killing them in 1 or 2 shots, and if they just die in 1 shot, then they don't have time to heal. So for my Mod 2, the RPM is 240, but when you have the full buff up with the 25% RPM, this is going to be 300 RPM. Mine has 15 expertise, the normal stats, and then I have the talent Sadist to amplify weapon damage by 30% to the bleeding enemies. And then I have weapon handling, rounds minus reload speed, stability, and stability. Then my Urban MDR, just using it for the talent, and I have pressure point on here. So amplify weapon damage by 15% to enemies under status effect, which is the bleed from Hollow Point. Then for the skills, I'm using the Banshee Pulse, mainly to get my first round of Hollow Point ammo. And then since I'm using all directives with the cool skills, I don't really use it much after that. And then I'm using the Precision Smart Cover. So my Smart Cover is going to be tier 0. It's going to give me 14% damage to targets out of cover. I have 15 expertise, a radius mod, and a damage to targets out of cover mod. Then if we look at the stats, I'm sitting at 54% crit chance. Like I said, you could go as low as 35% if you want, because you can stack 25% with the event, but I don't really like going too low. I just don't really like starting off super weak and then trying to rely on the global event stacking to get more damage. And then for the crit damage, I'm sitting at 122%, which with the buff will go up to 172%. Then for the weapon handling, I'm sitting at 12%, which will go up to a max of 47%. And then I have 700,000 armor and 72,000 armor on kill. Then last is the specialization. I'm using Gunner, mainly so I can use the Banshee Pulse, so I can apply a status effect whenever I need it. Then this also gives 10% armor on kill. This will have the talent supply line, so it's going to regenerate your ammo in the background. This really helps with Pistolero if you accidentally lose your hollow point ammo. And then have the rifle selected here for a little extra weapon damage. So that is the new global event and how it works. So leave a comment down below. Let me know what you think of it. I think it's pretty fun, but I would probably tweak a few things. I think the main one is the Guardian Angel thing, because at least to me, the way it's worded, it kind of sounds like they wanted you to play into it and run and gun with it. But with it only lasting 10 seconds and having a 2-minute cooldown, it's nothing more than just an added perk to me. It's not something you can really play into, it's just kind of there. Because if you play really squishy, then you're just going to get wrecked by the 2-minute cooldown. And then if you play tanky, then it just doesn't go off in the first place. And of course, having more opportunity to be invincible, they would probably have to adjust the power that you get down a little bit, but I think I would be okay with that. I think it would make it more interesting to try and make other builds that are based around this immunity rather than it just being a perk that goes off every once in a while. The other thing I would probably change is the stacking crit chance. I don't really know why they do this. It's one of the seasonal modifiers this season as well, where you stack crit chance, but it doesn't go over the 60% crit chance cap. So aside from maybe a few very specific builds, like maybe a bighorn, where you don't really go into crit chance anyway, and then this event, all that crit chance would just be an added bonus. But for most builds, your damage comes from crit chance and crit damage. So making your build with really low crit chance and then relying on this short window buff to gain your crit chance, it just doesn't really make sense to me at least. So essentially I'm starting with higher crit chance, so all of the crit chance you would gain from the buff is just wasted for me. It would be nice if you build your crit chance to the 60% cap like you normally would, and then the added stacking crit chance goes over cap. That way you're not nuking the starting point of your build just for this short window of higher potential damage. But anyway, that's my 2 cents on this new global event. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time.